Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. As mentioned, this morning's sharing is entitled Honoring the Buddha. But first, before honoring the Buddha, we must understand who is this person which we designate the Buddha and what were his accomplishments. So in a way, as we are in the month of Visakha, culminating in the full moon day of Vesak, or more commonly called Buddha Day in many parts of the world, we need to understand what are the key significance of Vesak. And then moving on from there, covering the issue of honoring the Buddha and what we need to do to honor the Buddha. Well, essentially, the Vesak, or the month of Visakha, is an extremely important period in the Buddhist tradition. And it is this month that the Bodhisattva, or the Buddha to be, was born in Lumbini Park, and at the age of 35 years, attained the unexcelled self-awakening, which we call Buddhahood. And after teaching for 45 years, he attained Mahā PariNibbāna. And this is common knowledge among many Buddhists, but for those who are a little bit unfamiliar, the young prince was born to Queen Mahamaya in Lumbini Garden, which is situated near the borders of India and Nepal, in the year 623 before Common Era. You can see Queen Mahamaya is the lady standing up with the right hand holding onto a branch of the sal tree. Of course, a lot of these paintings and stories, especially on the early days, early life of the young prince, is heavily romanticized, especially, and taken from a lot of it taken from the Lalita Vistara Sutra, a Mahayana writing composed a few hundred years after the Buddha passed away. So it is not recorded in the Buddhist scriptures at all. Also mentioned are the four sights, or the four divine messengers. Now, in the early days, when the child was born, there was examination of the date of birth, date and time of birth, as well as the bodily marks. And as such, there were wise men who predicted that the prince would either become a great king, a great conqueror, or a great religious teacher. But there were amongst these wise men some who actually predicted or confirmed that he would one day become a great religious teacher, subject to certain conditions. And the father, King Suddhodana, was very concerned. As you know, any king would prefer that their child will continue to take over the kingdom. And these conditions involve if that the young prince, when growing up, were to see an old man, depicted by the painting on the bottom left of this picture, an old man walking by, and a sick man, the top left hand corner, and top right, a dead body. And the bottom right picture is that of a samana. Samana is not a Buddhist monk, because there was no Buddhism at that time, the early days. Samana means a person who has renounced the world, which is very common in India in those days. So these were the four sights which were mentioned to the king in the early days. And the king did a lot of strategies to try to keep the prince in the palace. So in the suttas, there are mentioned that the prince was brought up in a lap of luxury and lived in 3 mansions, or some might call it palaces. And he was not allowed out of the palace. But when he came of a certain age, he actually confronted his father that he, being a prince and later take over the reign of the kingdom, he had not seen his own country. So of course, he had to leave the palace and take a look. And the paintings actually show that he went out with his charioteer, Chana, and he happened to chance upon these 4 sights, which sparked his thinking. And soon he decided to renounce the palace life, which was a common practice in those days, where many householders, if they feel that they want to lead a religious life, they would actually renounce the what they call conventional life and do their seeking. And of course, this Kopatuling artistic rendition is that of him crossing the river and later cutting off his hair. And this he did at the age of 29 years. Soon after renunciation, the ascetic Gotama, now we don't call him a prince, we call him the ascetic Gotama because he's practicing some degree of asceticism. And he went to study under teachers. And the first one he went to was Alara Kalama. And he found his doctrine inadequate, especially when he was, ascetic Gotama was trying to find answers to cure old age, sickness, and death. And without these answers, he left him. And he went on to Uddaka Ramaputta. And later, after mastering all his doctrines, he still found them inadequate, and he left this teacher too. Now, these two teachers were very, very accomplished teachers in the time. And so without any possibility of learning anything from famous teachers present during his time, he decided to follow the common trend of the seekers, and that was the practice of asceticism. There are a few suttas that mention his striving during the 6 years that included the first two teachers, and then after that into deeper and deeper asceticism. So this is just an extract from the Mahā Sutta, Majjhima Nikāya Sutta number 36. The Buddha mentioned, I thought, suppose I were to take only a little food at a time, only a handful of a time of bean soup, lentil soup, veg soup, or pea soup. And over time, of course, my body became extremely emaciated simply from eating too little. My limbs became like the jointed segments of vine stems and bamboo stems. My backside became like a camel's hoof. My spine stood out like a string of beads. My ribs jutted out like the jutting rafters of an old rundown barn. And the what they call artistic rendition on the top right literally shows the ascetic Gotama, what they call in a very, very extreme what they call starvation mode, some would say. And the Buddha continues, the gleam of my eyes appeared to be sunk deep in my eye sockets, like the gleam of water deep in a well. The skin of my belly became so stuck to my spine that when I thought of touching my belly, I grabbed hold of my spine as well. And when I thought of touching my spine, I grabbed hold of the skin of my belly as well. If I urinated or defecated, I fell over on my face right there, and so on. So these were just some excerpts of the practices he did, but of course there are other suttas that go into greater detail. But the key issue is, after so many years of practice and almost dying from it, okay, the Buddha commented, but with this raking practice of austerities, I haven't attained any superior human state, any distinction in knowledge or vision worthy of the noble ones. Could there be another path to awakening? That was a doubt he had regarding the ascetic practices. And the picture on the right is not of the Buddha, but of ascetic Gotama during his early years of striving, following the ascetic method. And you can see the skin and bone he was literally having. In some legends also, versions of the legends indicated that he actually fainted and he was brought back to consciousness by a passing by goat's herd boy who fed him some milk. And that gave him an idea that he cannot go on looking for answers with an extremely weakened body. And that's why this doubt came in. Could there be another path to awakening? And the Buddha recalled to his monks, I recall once when my father, the Sakyan, was working, and I was sitting in the cool shade of a rose apple tree, then quite secluded from sensuality, secluded from unskillful mental qualities, I entered and remained in the first jhana. Rapture and pleasure born of seclusion, accompanied by directed thought and evaluation. Could that be the path to awakening? Then came the realization. This is the path to awakening, I thought. Now, this is interesting. When he was around 7 years old, now this recollection is when he was about 7 years old, that his father brought him out with some nurses and let him sit under the rose apple tree, while the father would launch the plowing festival, which many Sunday school students, Buddhist Sunday school students would acknowledge. And the father would ceremoniously go into the mud together with what they call leading farmers to actually start the plowing. And this is ceremonial event that launched the whole plowing festival for the country at that time. So when he was seated underneath, when the young prince was seated underneath the rose apple tree, he's able to attain the first jhana. Now, what is this jhana? Jhana. Essentially, it is a measure, a unit of calmness, of tranquility, or some text translated as a unit of concentration. First jhana is just the first step. As you go deeper, you can attain the second, third, and fourth jhana, and so on. Each of these jhana stages have various properties. In this case, rapture and pleasure born from seclusion, accompanied by directed thought and evaluation, arose in his mind. So this was clearly a different kind of meditation from what he was taught by Alara Kalama and Uddaka Ramaputta. So with that, he realized that he cannot proceed with his quest if he was in an extremely weakened state. And he mentioned, suppose I were to take some solid food, some rice and porridge. So I took some solid food, some rice and porridge. So when I had taken solid food and regained strength, then quite secluded from sensuality, secluded from unskillful mental qualities, and so on. And in this picture on the right shows a scene whereby the Bodhisattva or the ascetic Gotama had strengthened himself sufficiently, and he happened to wander around the Buddha Gaya region, and he's now seated underneath the banyan tree. And the river in the background in this painting is that of the Naranjara River. And who's this lady? Well, this lady's name is Sujata, offering milk rice. It so happened that many years earlier, this lady, who's the daughter of a rich cow's herd person, was to get married, and she came to this tree and made a vow to the deities present in this tree, so that when she get married and she would give birth, let her first child be a son. And her wish was somehow fulfilled. She got a son, and for many years she has been coming over to this tree to fulfill her vow of making offerings to the deities. And it so happened, ascetic Gotama on that day came and sat down underneath this banyan tree, and of course she was very happy and thought that this ascetic Gotama was actually the tree deity. But whatever it is, she offered milk rice, a specialty. They use milk to wash the rice and to cook the rice also, and other intricacies in the recipe. This was very nourishing for ascetic Gotama, because after this meal, he went to a nearby tree, which today we call the Bodhi tree, to put in the supreme effort to gain enlightenment. So when seated underneath the Bodhi tree, the Buddha recalled, I entered and remained in the first jhana, second jhana, third jhana. I entered and remained in the fourth jhana. Purity of equanimity and mindfulness, neither pleasure nor pain. But the pleasant feeling that arose in this way did not invade my mind and remain. When the mind was thus concentrated, purified, bright, unblemished, rid of defilement, pliant, malleable, steady, and attained to imperturbability, I directed it to the knowledge of recollecting my past lives. Now, the central portion here in yellow and in bold is the aspect of meditation. Now, meditation itself is not the end. meditation is a means to the end. It is to purify your mind, as mentioned here, when his mind, and the Bodhisattva's mind was concentrated, purified, and bright, okay, malleable, and so on. With these properties, then you use the mind to do something. And the bottom paragraph says, the Buddha recalled, I directed it to the knowledge of recollecting my past lives. I recollected my manifold past lives. That is, 1 birth, 2, 5, 10, 50, 100, 1,000, 100,000, and then many eons of cosmic contraction, many eons of cosmic expansion, many eons of cosmic contraction and expansion. There I had such a name, belonged to such a clan, had such an appearance, such was my food, such my experience, and so on, and such the end of my life. Passing away from that state, I re-arose there. There too, I had such a name, such and so on, until such the end of my life. Passing away from that state, I re-arose here. Thus, I remembered my manifold past lives in their modes and details. Now, going up the first paragraph, especially the underlined portion in yellow, the Buddha was able to mention that he was able to recollect his past lives very far back, down to the extent of aeons of cosmic contraction, many aeons of cosmic expansion, many aeons of cosmic contraction and expansion. Now, this aspect of knowledge actually conforms to some extent the modern astronomical findings of today, that many of us who are familiar with our universe know that our galaxies are moving away from each other right now, which means the universe that we are staying in right now is currently expanding. So astronomers have not seen a contracting universe yet, let alone contracting and expansion. So the nature of the Buddha's mind was able to go so far back that he was able to see the, shall we say, the growth and contraction of the universe itself. So this past life recollection was what they call the Bodhisattva's first knowledge he attained in the first watch of the night. The first watch of the night is usually on the Vesak Eve, in this case, is from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. on Vesak Eve. So ignorance was destroyed, knowledge arose. And then the Bodhisattva continues. When the mind was thus concentrated, purified, bright, and so on, I directed it to the knowledge of the passing away and reappearance of beings. I saw by means of the divine eye, purified and surpassing the human, beings passing away and reappearing. And I discerned how they are inferior and superior, beautiful and ugly, fortunate and unfortunate, in accordance with their karma. Now, the bottom portion in yellow, especially the underlying portion, is that of the Bodhisattva was able to see beings that are born inferior or superior, beautiful, ugly, fortunate, and unfortunate. So what today we call, some people have good luck in their lives, bad luck in their lives, but what is it caused by? And clearly in this recollection, the Buddha said, in accordance with their karma, karma being their earlier actions. And the Buddha further elaborates, these beings who were endowed with bad conduct of body, speech, and mind, who reviled the noble ones, held wrong views, and undertook actions under the influence of wrong views after death, have reappeared in the plane of deprivation, the bad destination, the lower realms, in hell. But these beings who were endowed with good conduct of body, speech, and mind, who did not revile the noble ones, who held right views, and undertook actions under the influence of right views after death, have reappeared in the good destinations, in the heavenly world. So clearly, it is our actions of body, speech, and mind that determine our destinations, whether in the lower realms with more unpleasant lives, or in good, better destinations in the heavenly world. And this is repeated. So which means whatever rebirth in our lower realms or even in hell is temporary, and then we may get a chance to be born as a human, of course, temporary, and in better destination in the heavenly world, also temporary. And it goes what I call yo-yo. You go up and down the planes of existence ad infinitum. That means there is no ending of that. All driven by the conduct of our body, speech, and mind. So this knowledge of the appearance and disappearance of beings, this was the second knowledge I attained in the second watch of the night. The second watch of the night being that of what I call from 10 p.m. on the Vesak Eve to 2 a.m. on early Vesak morning. Ignorance was destroyed. And the Bodhisattva continues. When the mind was thus concentrated, purified, and bright, I directed it to the knowledge of the ending of mental fermentations or mental defilements. I discerned, as it was actually present, that this is dukkha. This is the origin of dukkha. This is the cessation of dukkha or the ending of dukkha. This is the way leading to the ending of dukkha. These are fermentations, the origin of fermentations, cessation of fermentations, and the way leading to the cessation of fermentations. My heart, thus knowing, thus seeing, was released from the fermentation of sensuality, released from the fermentation of becoming, released from the fermentation of ignorance. With release, there was the knowledge released. I discerned that birth is ended, the holy life fulfilled, the task done. There is nothing further for this world. Now, this page is quite important in the sense that through the three knowledges that the Bodhisattva attained, with this he attained Buddhahood, and there was a release from the fermentation of becoming. Becoming meaning he has no more rebirth. So in the yellow portion, I discern that birth is ended. Therefore, the Buddha's, that life was his last. So the question as to where is the Buddha now does not apply, because the rest of us, when we pass away, we are born again and again because we still have the defilements, especially the defilement of ignorance that fuel our birth. But in the case of the Buddha, he has been released from the fermentation of ignorance and thus becoming. So for him, birth is ended. So his life at that time would be the last. So, and he says the holy life is fulfilled, the task done, and no further actions need to be done in this world. So, and he concludes this by saying that this is the third knowledge I attained in the third watch of the night. Third watch of the night being from 2 a.m. on early Vesak morning to 6 a.m. Ignorance was destroyed, knowledge arose, darkness was destroyed, light arose, as happens in one who is heedful, ardent, and resolute. And the prince, who later became Ascetic Gotama, and now became the Buddha, the Samma Sambuddha. Now, a note, Samma Sambuddha, S-A-M-M-A, Samma means fully, completely, perfectly. And the Sam in front of the word Buddha, Sam means self. And the word Buddha means awaken. So Samma Sambuddhahood can also mean fully self-awakened or perfectly self-awakened. And this he attained at the age of 35 years. Now, soon after, and with the invitation of Brahma Sahampati, the Buddha declared in the Ayatana Sutta from the Samyutta Nikāya, chapter number 6, Sutta number 1, open are the doors to the deathless, to those with ears. Let them show their conviction. Now, some important points to note is that open are the doors to the deathless. Why is that deathless? And some people might say, oh, the Buddha passed away, but how can you say that's deathless? Well, if there is not a concept of holding on to life, that is the issue, because we note that everyone, every being that is born must die. And therefore, in the case of the Buddha, it's no exception. This is a natural law. Since he was born, his body must pass away. But whether he gets to be born again, that's up to him. And since he has eliminated ignorance, he cannot be born again. So as long as the Buddha is not born again, he cannot die. And therefore, he attained the deathless. This is the key issue. Now, soon after his enlightenment, the Buddha went to seek the 5 ascetics who had earlier accompanied him during his 6 years of exertion using asceticism. He journeyed from Bodhi up north towards Sarnath, and he came to them and he delivered the first sermon called the Dhamma-inspired Sutta, setting the wheel of Dhamma in motion, found in the Sangha Nikāyas, chapter number 56, Sutta number 11. Now, in this sutta, I extract a certain verse that mentions vision arose, insight arose, discernment arose, knowledge arose, illumination arose within me with regard to things never heard before. This is the noble truth of dukkha, and so on. Now, the key point I want to highlight is illumination arose within me with regard to things never heard before. The aspect of things never heard before is critical. Why? Because there have been assertions by people from other philosophies or other religions. They claim that the Buddha took the ideas from existing Brahmanical philosophy, the community he stayed in, the religion they believe in, and massaged it and came up with his own brand. Okay, this is wrong because the Buddha clearly says, never heard before. The other thing is, and other philosophies claim that the Buddha is a messenger. Messenger being somebody must have come down, either an angel or God himself, come down and whisper into the Buddha's ears. And then after that, the Buddha would just walk around and repeat what the angel has mentioned to him or whispered into his ear. And that is clearly debunked by this statement, never heard before, which means all this came from within him. Vision arose, insight arose, all from within him. The 5 ascetics in the picture clearly shows the Pancha Vagya, Pancha meaning 5, the 5 ascetics consisting of Kondanya, Asaji, Bhaddiya, Vappa, and Mahā. In this picture, you can see of the 5 ascetics, the 4 have black hair, and the one on the bottom left has got white hair. The white hair ascetic his name is Kondanya. Kondanya is distinguished because he was one of the Brahmins present during Prince Siddhartha when he was a baby, just soon after being born in Lumbini Park. He was one of the wise men who examined the birth time, date, and bodily marks of the baby. And he's one of the 2 that actually predicted that the baby will grow up to be a great religious teacher. And he has been waiting all this time for the prince to grow up. And by that time, he was already an old man. Soon after, the Buddha managed to have 60 enlightened disciples under him. And he sent them off on missionary work. Hence the title, the first missioners. And the Buddha mentioned, and this verse is contained in the Mahā found in the Vinaya Pitaka. Free am I, monks, from all snares. You, monks, are also free. Go, monks, on tour for the benefit of the common folk, for the happiness of the common folk, out of compassion for the world, for the welfare, the benefit, and happiness of the gods and human beings. Teach the Dhamma, monks, that is lovely in the beginning, lovely in the middle, and lovely at the end. So clearly from this extract from the Vinaya Pitaka, that this Dhamma that the Buddha has shared with these monks and with us is for our benefit, for our happiness, for our welfare. Okay, so bear that in mind. So some people might ask, what is the purpose of Buddhism? Well, it's for our benefit, happiness, and welfare. Is one way to answer this question. And of course, the Buddha walked around northern India and taught for 45 years. so many scenes in which he encountered what the challenges. He managed to convince people. He managed to stop wars and so on. So many people benefited from the Buddha's missionary work. Dhamma Vinaya. Now, towards the end of the Buddha's teaching or Dhammadutta career, Venerable Ananda in the Mahā PariNibbāna Sutta found in Nikāyas, Sutta number 16, asked the Buddha who would lead the order of monks and nuns after the Buddha had passed away. Then the Buddha gave this reply. Now, if the thought occurs to any of you, the teaching has lost its arbitrator. We are without a teacher. Do not view it in that way. Whatever Dhamma and Vinaya I have pointed out and formulated for you, that will be your teacher after my passing. So clearly, the Buddha did not appoint any one person or persons or monks or nuns to lead the order of monks, but he appointed his Dhamma Vinaya. The Buddha referred to the 45 years of teachings he had shared as Dhamma Vinaya, the Dhamma being the law and Vinaya being the discipline. And very often, people are confused as to what were the last words of the Buddha. And if you search internet, you can come across various ideas coming out and all this nonsense. But clearly, from the Mahā PariNibbāna is recorded here in English. Behold now, bhikkhus, I exhort you. All compounded things are perishable. Strive with heedfulness. So even towards the last words of the Buddha was still teaching. Now, coming forward to many misconceptions by Buddhists and even non-Buddhists, the key question is the Buddha God? Because many people go to various religious centers and they, especially Buddhist temples, they find there is a Buddha Rupa, the Buddha image there, and they are from not knowledgeable people, they see the Buddhists, what they call prostrating, offering flowers and so on. So they would think that the image right in the altar, in the shrine, is that of a god. So the key question is the Buddha a god? Well, this there were some incidences in which during the Buddha's time where people were wondering what he was. Now, in this case, the Buddha, shortly after his enlightenment in Bodh, he was on the journey up north to Sana to meet up with the 5 ascetics to teach the first sermon. So on the way out from Gaya, the Buddha was met by Upaka, an ascetic, who, struck by the serene appearance of the Buddha, inquired, "Who is your teacher? Whose teaching do you profess?" And the Buddha replied, "I have no teacher." This is yet another confirmation that there was nobody who whispered into his ear, or he took existing ideas and massaged it and came up with his own brand. So the Buddha replied, "I have no teacher. One like me does not exist in all the world, for I am the peerless teacher, the Arahat. I alone am supremely enlightened. Quenching all defilements, Nibbāna's calm have I attained. I go to the city of Kasi, or Benares, or present-day Varanasi, to set in motion the wheel of Dhamma. In a world where blindness reigns, I shall beat the deathless drum." And this quote is found from the Arya Pariyesana Sutta in the Majjhima Nikāya, Sutta number 26. So, the concept of Buddhist God. Well, interestingly, Buddhism is not concerned about creator gods and so on. And of course, some Buddhists insist that there must be a God. They hold dearly to the concept of God. And Ajahn Buddhadasa, a renowned, well-venerated Thai teacher, mentioned this. The law of nature is the law of conditionality, is the Buddhist God. So if you insist that there is a God in all the universe, well, the law of nature or the law of conditionality is a God. And the two pictures I show here, the top right hand corner clearly shows the law of conditionality or the law of nature in operation. The picture shows a germinating seed. And most people will just treat this germinating seed as, oh, this is something we learn in our young days in school, and may continue learning in higher levels of education. So what's the big deal? Well, law of nature, law of conditionality requires that a number of conditions come together in suitable proportion and at suitable time for a resultant to be able to take place. So for germination to take place, there must be, commonsensically, there must be viable seed. If you have earlier fried the seed and destroyed the chemical properties in it, what happens? It cannot germinate. But if it is a viable seed, a good seed, what happens? You put it on soil, moist soil. The soil provides nutrients. The moisture provides liquid water to the seed for germination to take place. The temperature around us must be reasonable in the sense that it mustn't be too cold, like in the Arctic Circle, or too hot, like in the Sahara Desert. Must be suitable for that seed, the temperature range. And then with this moisture and so on, germination starts occurring. And the next stage, you see roots coming out, and roots only grow down because there is gravity. If there's no gravity, there's no down, because the seed, the root or rootlet does not know where is down. And soon what they call the cotyledons come out and leaves come out, the green portion, it grows the opposite direction of gravity, it grows up. And if you put it near a window, it will grow towards light. So light, the sunlight is needed for this. So you can see from this simple primary school experiment, there are a number of conditions. The need for soil with proper nutrients, with moisture, with the temperature, with a good seed, with light, with oxygen, and so on. All these coming together for germination and growth of a seedling, a shootlet, or a plant to be able to take place. And something on the left, you can see what we learned in geography in the school days, that water evaporates from our water sources, from our rivers, from the seas, and rises up into the sky and forms clouds. And at a certain under certain conditions, precipitation, or more commonly called rain, occurs, and it flows down, and the cycle repeats itself, and largely driven by the warmth of the sun. So many conditions coming together for this cycle of evaporation and rain and so on to take place around us. So in other suttas, from the Majjhima Nikāya Sutta number 79, the Buddha mentions this aspect of conditionality. When this is, this comes to be. When this arises, this arises. When this is not present, this is not. And when this ceases, this ceases. And so on. And a further quote at the bottom, Majjhima Nikāya Sutta number 115, something similar. Okay, so the Buddha, if you insist there is a Buddhist God there, then we can refer it to as the law of nature, the law of conditionality. But who is the Buddha? In yet another case, what happened was Brahmin Dona happened to be following the Buddha. Now, of course, Brahmin Dona didn't know who the Buddha was, but at that time, the ground was wet and the Blessed One was walking. And Brahmin Dona, being very knowledgeable as to reading bodily marks, he noticed the footprint of the Buddha had certain unique marks not present among common humans. And he followed the Buddha. And when the Buddha went to the foot of a tree to rest after a long journey, he approached the Buddha and said to him, "Could you be a Deva, sir?" And the Buddha replied, "I will not be a Deva." "Could you be a Gandhava?" "I will not be a Gandhava." "Could you be a Yaka?" "I will not be a Yaka." "Could you be a human being?" "I will not be a human being, Brahmin." number 4 is probably the most perplexing answer given by the Buddha to this Brahmin. And the Buddha continued, just as a blue, red, or white lotus flower born in the water and grown up in the water rises above the water and stands unsoiled by the water, even so, though born in the world and grown up in the world, I have overcome the world and dwell unsoiled by the world. Remember me, Brahmin, as awakened. So the Buddha described himself as a person who has awakened. And this is found in Dona Sutta from the Anguttara Nikāya, Book of 4, Sutta number 46. Now, earlier in the puja, you have already gone through the 9 qualities of the Buddha. This is repeated many times in many suttas. This extract is from the Majjhima Nikāya Sutta number 12. Let's go over to the English portion. The Blessed One is accomplished, fully enlightened, perfect in true knowledge and conduct, sublime, knower of the world, incomparable leader of persons to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, enlightened when blessed. In our practice, the Buddhists are frequently encouraged to chant the Pali, but more importantly, that Buddhists should know the 9 qualities of Sammasambuddha as well as its meaning. What do you mean by accomplished? What do you mean by fully enlightened? What do you mean by true knowledge and conduct? And so on. So this is an opportunity for Buddhists to get acquainted with the Buddha. And to get acquainted with the Buddha is to know each and every one of the 9 qualities and what it is significance. Okay, so this is something that the Buddhists should study in order to be able to honor the Buddha properly, because otherwise you'll be honoring someone you do not know. Knowing the life history and how he became a Buddha is one, but to know the qualities of the Buddha is even more important. And to know the Buddha is also to know the Dhamma. And here we have the qualities of the Dhamma, which in the earlier puja this morning, we have already recited. But going through the English, well proclaimed is the Dhamma by the Blessed One, visible here and now, timeless, inviting investigation, leading onward to the goal, to be understood individually by the wise. Now, the 2 things I underline, akaliko in Pali, meaning timeless, is very important because the Dhamma here points to natural laws. Natural laws do not have an expiry date, okay, unlike things proclaimed by human beings. So akaliko means the Dhamma is not involved with time. So another way of putting it is, whoever heard of gravity having an expiry date, okay? And ehipasiko, commonly translated as come and see, but an alternate translation is inviting investigation. So the Dhamma is to be investigated. It is not a matter of, oh, I'm a Buddhist, so I should believe what the Buddha said. This is not what the Buddha actually taught. The Buddha insists that you investigate. Okay, investigate and thoroughly understand what the Buddha mentions, and to see the truths, the Four Noble Truths for yourself, not believe the Buddha. There is no belief in Buddhism. It is through knowing. And the only way to know is to walk the path. And one of the earlier tools is to investigate. So you have to ask questions and try to understand what is going on. And of course, the qualities of the Sangha, the 9 qualities of the Sangha recited earlier. In the English, the Sangha of the Blessed One's disciples. Now here, the Sangha of the Blessed One's disciples describe not just saffron wearing disciples, renunciates, but this chanting, the 9 qualities of the Sangha, refers to Arya Sangha. Arya means those members of the monastic order who have become enlightened, even attained the first stage of sainthood, are classified as Aryas. Of course, more so if you have attained full enlightenment, the Arahatship. So the Sangha of the Blessed One's disciples who have good conduct, who have upright conduct, who have wise conduct, who have dutiful conduct. In other words, the 4 types of noble disciples when taken as pairs, the 8 when taken as individual types. The 4 types of noble disciples, meaning describing the various stages of enlightenment, starting with Sotapan, the first stage of stream winning, where an individual uproots the first 3 out of the 10 defilements. The second stage of enlightenment, Sakakagami, meaning having what they call toned down the next 2 defilements. And the third stage of sainthood, Anagami, having uprooted these 2. So up to that stage, the third stage of sainthood, an individual, an Arya, has already uprooted the first 5 defilements out of the total of 10. And to gain full enlightenment, that means Arahathood, you have to uproot the balance 5. With the uprooting of the balance 5, an Arahat will have uprooted a total of 10 defilements. Okay, the 10 defilements include ignorance, thereby rendering the enlightened Arahat, the Arahat, having this as his last birth, like the Buddha. And continuing, they are the Sangha of the Blessed One's disciples, worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of reverential salutation, and the unexcelled field of merit for the world. Why? Because these individuals have accomplished themselves by uprooting the difficult defilements and become worthy of all these gifts, hospitality, offerings, and reverential salutation. And by doing so, we gain merit, punya. And they are often sought after to perform for lay people to get merit. What is this merit? This punya is for the what we call getting wholesome karmic energies that support us in our daily lives. Now, back to the key issue of today's or this morning's sharing. What did the Buddha say about honoring the Buddha? And this is found in the Mahā PariNibbāna Sutta again, from the Nikāyas Sutta number 16. Now, when the Buddha was almost ending his journey to Kusinara, in this case, he was actually lying down between 2 sal trees. Here, the Buddha mentions, Ananda, the twin sal trees are in full bloom, though it is not the season for flowering. And the blossoms rain upon the body of the Tathagata. Tathagata means this is how the Buddha referred to himself. Tathagata means thus gone. And the drop and scatter and are strewn upon it in worship of the Buddha. And the celestial coral flowers and heavenly sandalwood powder from the sky rain down upon the body of the Buddha, and drop and scatter and are strewn upon it in worship of the Buddha. And the sound of heavenly voices and heavenly instruments makes music in the air out of reverence for the Buddha. Okay, this is how nature as well as the devas, the heavenly beings, honor the Buddha, much like how we humans honor the Buddha. Yet, the Buddha says, yet it is not thus, Ananda, that the Buddha is respected, venerated, esteemed, worshipped, and honored in the highest degree. So clearly, this is not the way to do it. But Ananda, whatever bhikkhu or bhikkhuni, layman or laywoman, abides by the Dhamma, lives uprightly in the Dhamma, walks in the way of the Dhamma, it is by such a one that the Buddha is respected, venerated, esteemed, worshipped, and honored in the highest degree. Therefore, Ananda, thus should you train yourselves. We shall abide by the Dhamma, live uprightly in the Dhamma, walk in the way of the Dhamma. So clearly, the highest degree of honor and worship you can bestow to the Buddha is to follow his teachings, to live uprightly and walk in the way of the Dhamma, not by merely offering flowers and other offerings. So how do we, as advised by the Buddha, live by the Dhamma? So an overview of how we can approach this. And of course, we have to have compassion in our own life. That means we have to be compassionate towards ourselves, let alone others. So how do we approach this practice? Well, first thing first, we have to know what is this Dhamma, or Dhamma Vinaya taught by the Buddha. And this is summarized in the word pariyati, which essentially is getting acquainted with the Dhamma, to study the Dhamma. And after knowing what is the Dhamma, we should practice the Dhamma. And this is found in the Pali word patipati. And in Pati Veda, well, with study and then practice of the Dhamma, there comes realization, penetration, attainment, and comprehension of the Dhamma. So these three terms, pariyati, patipati, and Pati Veda, are found in the commentaries, as the venerable monks have tried to summarize the approach mentioned by the Buddha. So when you study the Dhamma, where do you study the Dhamma? Well, definitely you do not ask your neighbor, and we have to have appropriate sources. So the scripture of the Buddhists is basically found in the Pitaka. Ti meaning three, baskets is Pitaka. So the three baskets contain the Buddha's teachings and so on. So these three baskets comprising of the Vinaya Pitaka, Sutta Pitaka, and Abhidhamma Pitaka. Now, although Vinaya Pitaka essentially means a discipline for monastics, there are a lot of stories and guidelines in the Vinaya Pitaka that talks about lives of various enlightened disciples, as well as guidelines of how to practice, especially for the monastics, where lay people like us can take lessons from also. But importantly, the Sutta Pitaka is of great importance. And the language of the Tipitaka is that of Pali. The word Pali just means language of the Buddhist text. And in the Sutta Pitaka, we find we have the Nikāyas. Nikāyas are essentially collections comprising the Digha Nikāya, long discourses, Majjhima Nikāya, the middle-length discourses, Samyutta Nikāya, subject-wise collection, Anguttara Nikāya, the numerically arranged collection, and the Khuddaka Nikāya, the minor collection. Now, today with the availability of internet, we have websites, and the bottom right, I give to you some three well-known sources where you can get hold of these suttas from the Nikāyas and so on. The Sutta Central, Access to Insight, and BuddhaNet. There are some Buddhists that have a different approach regarding Buddhism. They concentrate almost exclusively on reciting the suttas or various kinds of chants or formulations. So their approach is chanting and chanting and chanting. But what did the Buddha say regarding chanting or reciting versus practicing the teaching? Here, the Buddha word contained in the Dhammapada verse number 20 mentions, little though he recites the sacred text, but puts the teaching into practice, forsaking lust or greed, hatred and delusion, with true wisdom and emancipated mind, clinging to nothing of this or any other world, he indeed partakes of the blessings of a holy life. Clearly, the Buddha word in Dhammapada verse 20 emphasizes the practice of the Dhamma as more important than mere chanting. Chanting has a function. Why do the monks chant? Well, in those days, they did not have digital recorders or tape recorders, and they didn't have paper in India. They had to preserve the teachings. And one of the ways was memorization. So memorization is facilitated by chanting, repeating over and over again. That was their way of preserving the Dhamma. But ultimately, the Dhamma is to be practiced, not to be chanted. And earlier, there was chanting, recitation of various offerings. Here, I'd like to draw your attention to this particular offering, flower offering. Now, going straight to the English, with these flowers, as long as they last, colorful, fragrant, and excellent, the sacred feet on the lotus of the Lord of Sages I revere. So this is a common recitation in which the devotee would offer flowers and out of faith in the Buddha. But the important thing is still that of practice. So the chant continues. The Buddha I revere with varied flowers. By this my merit may there be released. So this is, even in the offering of flowers, in this chant, there is an aspiration by making merit through offerings, by seeking the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha as a refuge. There is merit, and therefore may there be release. So that portion of the chant is an aspiration. And then comes the reflection, the Dhamma reflection. Even as this flower fades away, so will my body be destroyed. So the offering of flowers is not just a matter of making merit to expressing your confidence in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, but that also an aspiration for release, but at the same time, a Dhamma reflection that this flower fades away, so will my body be destroyed. So very often in the home altars, there are people that keep on changing the flowers on altar to keep the flowers ever fresh. But if you do keep on doing that, how are you able to see the fading of the flowers? How are you able to reflect on this important Dhamma message of anicca, of impermanence, symbolized by fading flower, and then reflecting that, and in this particular chant, so will my body be destroyed. So the reflection, the Dhamma reflection, is very important. Going to the English, these flowers, bright and beautiful, fragrant and good smelling, handsome and well formed, soon indeed discolored. Ill smelling and ugly they become. This very body, beautiful, fragrant and well formed, soon indeed discolored, ill smelling and ugly it becomes. This body of mine too is of the same nature, will become like this and has not escaped from this. So continuing on the chant on flower offering, there is continued reflection, Dhamma reflection on using the flower as what they call a teaching aid, a symbolized tool, and then looking upon the flowers as it ages, as it become discolored, become smelly, become ugly, and then using that analogy, seeing these decaying flowers and reflecting on our own bodies that we too are impermanent, and therefore this is the nature of existence. So I hope with this that we should go through the other chants, especially in offering incense, water, and so on, and light, and to draw Dhamma lessons from these chants, especially understanding the meaning of these chants, not just merely chanting. Now, earlier there was mention about gaining merit. Now, in the sutta called the Punya Kiriya Vatu Sutta, and also repeated in the Itivuttaka 60, found in the Khuddaka Nikāya, this was said by the Buddha. Because there are these three grounds for making merit. What three? One should train in deeds of merit that yield long-lasting happiness, giving, virtue, mental development. And we have often heard the Pali terms dana, sila, bhavana as the step-by-step way are the things that we need to practice. We need to practice dana, meaning to give. Sila means virtue or morality. And bhavana, mental development. Now, by cultivating these three things, deeds yielding happiness, the wise person is reborn in happiness, in an untroubled, happy world. So the Buddha encourages us to gain merits, because it fuels our journey through samsara. But at the same time, dana, sila, bhavana brings us higher and higher along the path of practice in the Dhamma. Elsewhere, the Buddha teaches 4 things lead to the growth of wisdom. What 4? Associating with good people, Well, the whole of Buddhism is about gaining and growing wisdom, and we have to do it step by step. And associating with good people. What do you mean by good people? Good people, as the Buddhist term frequently mentioned, are those of Kalyana Mitta, means good-hearted friends. Good-hearted friends or good people are people we associate with who have our good welfare at heart. They want to take care of us. And if we are silly enough to want to do some silly things, like breaking the precepts, they remind us that we should observe at least the 5 precepts. So they are our reminders. When we have questions as to what to do to lead a life of Dhamma, then we can ask them. And similarly, those are also people, and they may have lapses in judgment also. And we too can become good friends to them by advising them, by reminding them, and so on. So as a community, a community of good friends, of Kalyana Mittas, going along the path, we support each other. And in the another sutta called the Upada Sutta, the Buddha terms that associating with good people is the whole of the holy life, even among monks. So monks need to support each other, and more so even lay people. We need to support each other. Now, associating with good people implies another important aspect, that we do not associate with not so good people or with bad people, people that only have their interests at heart and not our interests. And therefore, that implies that we need to choose our friends. We have the right to choose our friends. Okay, on people we associate with, especially if we want. Sometimes in the working world, we cannot choose who we mix with, but we can ignore silly comments from these people. And when we leave work, we might mix up with those people we have chosen to associate with. There are many Dhammapada verses and other suttas where the Buddha mentions the virtue of looking for wise people to mix up with. Listening to the true teaching. Well, as I mentioned, the 3 ways, pariyati, patipati, pativeda. Pariyati, in studying the Dhamma, in learning the Dhamma, and even practicing the Dhamma, we need to listen to the true teaching. Listening was the ancient way of learning. Okay, of course, today we have more resources available to us. We still listen to the teachings. Now we have video, we have live teaching, where the speaker may come before the audience and share the Dhamma. So listening here means studying, learning the true teaching. Now, learning the teaching is one, but you have to evaluate, because is it a true teaching or just mere words? So we have to take advice from the Kalama Sutta, where the Buddha advises the Kalamas as to how to initially evaluate whether certain things mentioned by a speaker makes reasonable sense or not, whether it hurts people, whether it's supportive of the welfare of people, and so on. We have to make commonsensical judgments and to reject those which are hurtful to us and the rest of community. So learning requires screening and investigating the teaching too. So it's just not merely listening and absorbing lock, stock, and barrel what the teacher says. The Buddha doesn't want that. He wants you to learn and to screen and to question and investigate all teachings, including the Buddhas. Proper attention. Well, in order to learn, we need to pay attention to the speaker and to try to understand. And sometimes in the modern day, of course, we have recordings. We can go through the talk again, the sharing again to understand. But proper attention covers something deeper. Proper attention means that we need firstly to pay attention. And that is difficult among many people these days because our minds are often described as monkey minds. Our minds jump here, jump there, and all over the place. So even attending a Dhamma talk, our minds are not always at the Dhamma talk. We can be elsewhere. We can be thinking of work, thinking about home, thinking about this and that, anywhere except at the Dhamma talk. And then as we practice, we learn how to gather our thoughts, our straying thoughts of wasted energy all over the place. We gather our attention, and that is called proper attention. So with proper attention, we focus. We gain more concentration, more calm and tranquility, as in right concentration. We also increase our mindfulness. So proper attention covers this aspect. So our ability to pay attention, be more mindful, grows with this proper attention. And then practicing in line with the teaching. So of course, there are other aspects in the Dhamma taught by the Buddha that we also need to take care of. Okay, so in this particular sutta from the Buddhi Sutta, Anguttara Nikāya Book of 4, the Buddha concludes, these 4 things lead to the growth of wisdom. And it is this growing of understanding and wisdom that actually uproots the defilements that we have and render us along the path of the Aryas, the noble ones, and ultimately for us to gain enlightenment. Now, merits have often been mentioned in the earlier portion of this morning sharing. And how does one gain merits? Merits is related to karma. Merits is wholesome karmic energies generated. And in this particular slide, from the Nibbedika Sutta, Anguttara Nikāya Book of 6, the important distinction is that what is the relationship between intention and karma? And in this sutta, the Buddha clearly says, intention, I tell you, is karma. So if you purposely do something, you purposely kill a living being, then you have intention to kill, and therefore the karmic energies generated by that intention will be generated, and of course, with its resulting consequences, the result, the vipaka. So with wholesome intention, that means you want to offer dana, you want to help someone in need, then with the view of helping, of compassion, of loving kindness, that becomes your intention. And with that, your actions and karmic energies generated are wholesome. So intention is important. Now, this term intention is also important because there are certain things we did without intention, but yet living beings die. And once you understand the aspect, there was no intention, and yet there was death in a certain living being. What happens is that no unwholesome karmic energies were generated because intention is karma. So since there was no intention, there is no karmic energies generated, wholesome or unwholesome. So this is an important understanding. So reading through the rest of this quote, intention, I tell you, is karma. Intending, one does karma by way of body, speech, and mind. In the end, we are responsible because the intention is ours. We cannot blame anybody else. So in this Upajayatana Sutta from the Anguttara Nikāya Book of 5, the Buddha clearly mentions, I am the owner of my deeds. Deeds are your karma. The owner of your deeds. When you did certain action, you cannot blame somebody else. I am the owner of my deeds and heir to my deeds. Heir means after you pass away, you inherit these deeds. When you pass away, you cannot, your beautiful Lamborghini, your mansion, your stock and bonds in millions, and your diamonds and whatever can't follow you into the next life. You only inherit your karmic energies, which you have performed in this life and in earlier lives. Whether good or bad, you inherit all this. That's why the Buddha said, heir to my deeds. Deeds are my womb. Well, your actions decide what you will be born as, whether human or lower realms, the unfortunate realms, or the higher realms. These are my womb. These are also my relative. So your deeds affect who are your future parents, your father, mother, who are your brothers and sisters, your siblings, your relatives, your friends, and so on. So very often you are in that environment, whether you like it or not, based on your earlier deeds. These are also my refuge. Refuge because it will be your opportunities to come across circumstances that help to shelter you, to provide you with shelter, to shield you from calamities and so on. And in terms of the Dhamma, a refuge meaning whether you are supported by encountering the Buddha Dhamma or not. Some people have no chance to come across the Buddha Dhamma at all. Okay, no opportunities to come. So this is also your refuge because the Dhamma supports you, protects you, and so on. So in the end, I shall be the heir of whatever deeds I do, whether good or bad. In the end, whatever we perform as Buddhists throughout our life, in these Dhammapada verses, number 11 and 12, the essentials are, to bear in mind, are very important. So here the Buddha says, those who mistake the unessential to be essential and the essential to be unessential dwell in wrong thoughts, never arrive at the essential. Those who know the essential to be essential and the unessential to be unessential, dwelling in right thoughts, do arrive in the essential. So clearly something to bear in mind. And what are the essentials? Well, at least if you find that there are a lot of things to remember in this talk, the most important aspect you need to bring away from this morning sharing as a minimum is that of this quotation from the Dhammapada verse 183. Sabba papasa akaranang kusalasa upasampada sacitta parirapanang etang buddhana sasanang. Avoid evil, do good, purify your mind. This is the teaching of the Buddhas. So as a very minimum, you should remember, in summary, what Buddhas teach. And this Dhammapada verse 183 is a favorite of mine because it not only summarizes all the teachings of the Buddhas, including the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, but in simplistic terms, just reading the 3 lines, the 3 things, it lists clearly what we need to do. Avoid evil. How do you do that? Well, commonsensically, you say, please observe the 5 precepts as a minimum. The 5 precepts are abstention from this and that. So avoiding evil is to abstain from certain actions, certain thoughts, certain speech. And just because you abstain, it doesn't mean you're a good person. So you need to uplift yourself. You need to ennoble yourself. So by performing the ennoblers, by doing good. So the ennoblers are the exact opposite of the 5 precepts. If you don't kill, you try to save lives, and so on. So avoiding evil and doing good. These 2 alone safeguards you. It protects you from going to the lower realms and brings you higher. And especially in doing good, it helps you to open doors to listen to Dhamma teachings and provides opportunities to practice the Dhamma teachings. And what do you do when you practice? Well, you need to purify your mind. That the first thing to purify your mind is to get your thoughts collected. We are all scatterbrained, we are all monkey-minded, and therefore we need to collect, need to have attention, proper attention. So we bring the mind, our mental energies back to a certain spot, and we concentrate, and then we proceed from there to purify our mind. As like the Bodhisattva underneath the Bodhi tree on Vesak Eve and early Vesak morning, when his mind was thus concentrated, purified, and bright. So when you purify your mind approaches brightness. And therefore, you can use your mind later on when it's well developed, well practiced, to investigate nature and see things for yourself as they really are. In other words, to gain enlightenment. So how did the ancients praise the Buddha? Here I take a quote from the Therigatha from Mahā Pajapati Gotami Theri. Mahā Pajapati Gotami was the stepmother of Prince Siddhartha. Now, she herself said, Buddha hero, I praise be to you, you foremost among all beings, you who have released me from dukkha, and so many other beings too. So even though she is the stepmother of Prince Siddhartha, she too has been ever grateful to the Buddha for sharing the Dhamma. And since she has practiced it, the practice released her from dukkha. And of course, she mentions many other living beings around her too. So they also experience a bliss because they have attained Nibbāna. And from the Therikata, from Mahā Gotami theory, she also tells you how we could honor the Buddha. See the gathering of followers, putting forth effort, self-control, always with strong resolution. This is how to honor the Buddhas. So clearly, this is after the Buddha has mentioned that in the PariNibbāna Sutta, even an Arahat, Mahā Gotami too says that this is how we should honor, by knowing the Dhamma, by putting forth effort, being self-controlled, with strong resolution. Then we can make progress along the path. This is how we should honor the Buddha, not by merely chanting and offering this and that. We must know its significance and understand the Dhamma. That is how we should honor the Buddha. So with that, happy Buddha Day in the coming days. Sabbe Satta Sukhi Hontu. May all beings be happy.